Carmine Galante. He's certainly one of the more notorious figures in organized crime history.
Absolutely. A name that carries a lot of weight and, frankly, a lot of violence associated with it.
And we're looking into his life, his death, based on what records show. But almost right away, something really jumps out.
You mean the psychological evaluation?
Yeah, exactly. The
Thank
one
you.
from prison that reportedly, I mean, it says his mental age was around 14.
It's quite a statement, isn't it? 14. Especially when you think about the kind of power he wielded later on.
Right. It seems like such a mismatch.
Yeah.
Because everything else points to this, well, this cunning individual, a strategic thinker in his own way.
He absolutely had to be. To rise through the ranks, to manage the operations he did, that takes a certain kind of intelligence, regardless of what a formal test might say.
So how do we bridge that? This supposed adolescent mind versus the, the seasoned mob boss? Was it just raw aggression or something more calculated?
That's the million-dollar question, perhaps. Maybe it highlights different kinds of intelligence. Street smarts, manipulation, understanding power dynamics. That's not always measured in standard psych evaluations, is it?
No, definitely not. Let's look at some concrete facts. We have this 1956 FBI report. Physically, it describes him as 5'5", 160 pounds.
Right. Balding with brown, graying hair. It gives you a visual anchor.
And it lists his residence at the time and mentions these alleged connections to the Rosina Costume Company and an Abco vending company.
Which is pretty typical, right? Setting up or getting involved with legitimate businesses.
As a front.
Right.
Or for laundering.
Both, potentially. It provides a cover story, a veneer of legitimacy, and yes, a possible channel for dirty money.
And tracking him must have been difficult. He used, a whole string of aliases. Joe Dello, Charles Bruno, Joe Galliano, lots of Joes. Joe Russo, Charles Russo.
And the nickname Lalo. That was apparently the one used most often within his circles.
Using aliases, it's standard procedure in that world, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Creates confusion, makes it harder for law enforcement, rivals even, to keep tabs on someone reliably. Standard tradecraft.
His actual criminal record, though, it goes way back. An arrest in 1926 for robbery and assault.
Already involved in serious crime from a young age.
And later, he becomes a prime suspect in the 1943 murder of Carlo Tresca. Known to carry guns, considered armed, and extremely dangerous.
That Tresca murder was a big deal. Placing him as a suspect really puts him in the thick of major underworld conflicts early on.
There's even a 1930 arrest for the murder of a patrolman. He was released later, but still, it's on the record.
Being arrested for killing a cop, even if not convicted, tells you something about the level of violence he was associated with. It's a different league.
And it wasn't just violence. Records show involvement with illegal alcohol, too.
Right, the classic rackets.
An arrest in 1950 for running a big, floating crap game, and back in 47, possession of equipment for manufacturing alcohol. He seized the stills and vehicles.
Prohibition was long over, but illegal alcohol and gambling were still huge moneymakers for organized crime. His involvement shows he was right in the mix of those core activities.
What's also interesting is how he operated even while supposedly under supervision. Like that Tresca murder suspicion in 43, he was actually on parole at the time.
That tells you a lot about his attitude towards the legal system. A parole violation like that suggests, well, a complete disregard for the rules he was supposed to be following.
Seems deeply ingrained.
Very much so. The behavior just continues despite arrests, convictions, parole.
Now shifting slightly, that Rosina Costume Company mentioned in the 56 report, apparently he owned and operated it at the time.
Yes, the report even detailed some of its operations. Sewing machines, cutting tables, inventory.
And it was considered financially sound by local banks. So a seemingly legitimate enterprise.
It serves that purpose perfectly, doesn't it? Plausible income, a place to be, maybe a hub for other activities. It complicates the picture for investigators.
Okay, let's move forward to the end. July 12th, 1979, his death.
A very famous, very brutal end.
He's having lunch. Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant in Bushwick, Brooklyn. Not exactly hiding away.
No, out in the open. On a restaurant patio, in fact.
He's with Leonard Coppola, Giuseppe Trano, the restaurant owner, reportedly a relative, and his two bodyguards, Baldassare Amato and Cesare Bonventre.
Having lunch with associates, bodyguards present.
No.
It sounds like a normal day, almost. Which makes what happened next even more shocking.
Three masked men just appear. They go straight to the outdoor area, open fire with shotguns, handguns.
A sudden, violent assault. Very direct.
Galante, Toronto, and Coppola are killed right there. And there's that famous grim detail. Galante found with the cigar still in his mouth.
An image that really stuck, a symbol of his defiance maybe, or just the suddenness of it all.
But the most telling detail, the bodyguards. Manato and Bonventre, they were unharmed. The gunmen just fled.
That's the part that immediately raises eyebrows. In that world, when the principal is hit like that, the bodyguards either fight back and likely get hurt or killed, or...
Or they were in on it, or told to stand down.
Exactly. It screams betrayal or, at minimum, complicity. It's highly, highly suspicious that they walked away unscathed.
So the big question,
Mm.
who ordered the hit? Who pulled the triggers? There's been a lot of speculation.
Naturally, removing a figure like Galante creates a huge power vacuum.
Some accounts point fingers at names like Anthony Brino, Indelicado, Dominic Big Trinchera, Russell Morrow, Sandro Giordano.
And even one of the bodyguards present, Cesare Bonvente, sometimes called the tall guy.
Right. Different people allegedly involved as shooters, lookouts. These were figures associated with factions within the Bonanno family, weren't they? Rivals?
Precisely. It points strongly towards an internal cleanup, a coup, essentially. Galante had become too powerful, too independent, perhaps, for others within the family or the broader commission.
One name that sometimes gets thrown around, usually in more sensational accounts, is Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman.
Ah, yes, Kuklitsky.
But his claims about mafia involvement, including this, are generally seen as unreliable.
Extremely unreliable. Kuklinski was a documented serial killer, but also a known fabricator, especially regarding high-profile mob hits. There's no credible evidence linking him to Galante's murder. It seems to be mostly self-promotion on his part.
So, discount Kuklinski. The likely scenario points inwards, within the Bonanno family structure.
That's where most serious researchers and law enforcement analyses have landed, yes. An internal purge.
Which brings us back to the beginning in a way. This man, Carmine Galante. You have the report of a 14-year-old's mental age.
And yet, the reality of a cunning, ruthless boss who navigated decades of brutal underworld politics, built an empire, and ultimately required a coordinated, lethal conspiracy to remove.
It just doesn't quite seem to fit, does it? How does that reported assessment square with the strategic planning, the ruthlessness required?
It forces you to think about what intelligence really means in different environments. Maybe the skills needed to survive and thrive, where he did reading people, projecting threat, understanding loyalty and betrayal, just aren't captured by those standard tests. Or maybe the test was flawed or misinterpreted.
Or maybe he relied heavily on others for certain kinds of planning.
That's also possible, surrounding himself with capable people. But ultimately, he was the one at the top for a long time. It leaves you wondering about the real complexity of individuals like Galante operating in that hidden world where the lines between perception, reality, intellect, and instinct are just incredibly blurred.